Just, you worried ever about your safety?
No. And the reason I say that is because I think, a lot of what we're facing is an energetic and spiritual battle, I guess you could say. And I think in order, if you're afraid of these people, you're giving them. Well, like I mentioned earlier, the more you look at the people that were around Epstein, even before Epstein gets involved, it becomes very clear that what he was doing was not out of the ordinary for these particular groups, especially like arms dealers, like Adnan Khashoggi. He had an alleged harem of women that he used to blackmail powerful people in the private and public sectors on his yacht, and all other sorts of types of people. Robert Keith Gray, a PR executive that started working for Adnan Khashoggi around the same time Jeffrey Epstein allegedly did, has an alleged history of sexual blackmail for the CIA. And then you have allegations of Roy Cohn, the well-known New York mob attorney, also being involved in sexual blackmail stuff. I don't know. I just, at this point, I think my politics are I don't want the government to be run by organized crime.
That's what
I think that's a starting point for most Americans.
In an age of unparalleled global connectivity, we find ourselves at a crossroads. The systems that govern our world, media, finance, law, and technology, are no longer mere tools of governance, but weapons in a battle for control, waged by a select few. These elites, hidden in plain sight, manipulate these structures to maintain their grip on power, their wealth, and ultimately, our lives. But what if this battle is deeper than what we see on the surface? What if these power structures are not only designed to control our actions, but to erase the very essence of who we are? Whitney Webb exposes everything. Let's get into it. In a world where powerful elites manipulate the media, lies are no longer just distortions. They are tools of control. The campaign of lies is so effective that public assassinations can occur in broad daylight, but the perpetrators and motives remain hidden. Public figures like Jeffrey Epstein infiltrated the highest echelons of power. And the story of his life and death is a tragic example of how elites create and perpetuate a false narrative, hiding their corrupt actions and leaving the public in the dark.
Explain who he was.
So Robert Maxwell was involved in many things, but he definitely played a major role in undermining U.S. national security by selling bug software to nuclear laboratories in the United States. And this was directly facilitated by well-known statesmen in U.S. history, like Henry Kissinger, for example. And a lot of the people, I think, that enabled him, at least on the U.S. side, tend to be those that favor global governance and, they kind of don't want the U.S. to have that kind of monopoly on power. Because
all of his family, they were killed in the Holocaust, right?
Right.
And so he's in the West, England. He survives, becomes kind of William Randolph Hearst of England.
Yeah, media mogul, sure.
Yeah. And then betrays the West. And that's not because he was on the other, he wasn't on the Soviet side. He was on a global government side?
Well, I think you have to look at this network, and they've evolved over time, right? Robert Maxwell was very close to the Eastern Bloc. He had a very close relationship with intelligence figures in the KGB and also Bulgaria. He had a relationship with British intelligence and Israeli intelligence, and was involved in aspects of what later became known as Iran-Contra, which of course involves aspects of U.S. intelligence. So, I mean, he had his hands in, everywhere and everything. And I think ultimately people like him are interested in any deal they can make to advance their money and their power and their influence, they'll take it. So Robert Maxwell was very interested in having his family be like the Kennedy family, a political power dynasty. And that's part of why he started moving into New York City around, just a year or two before he ended up dying. And Ghislaine Maxwell was...
How deep does this manipulation go? And how far will the elites push the narrative to protect themselves? Epstein's vast network was far from an isolated anomaly. It was embedded in every major sector of global power: law enforcement, Wall Street, Silicon Valley, big business, real estate, philanthropy, media, and even high fashion. His connections to figures like Bill and Hillary Clinton expose a deeply ingrained system of corruption where political insurgency thrives. But the question arises, what is the full extent of these connections, and how many more Epstein-like figures remain hidden within the shadows?
You call it deep politics. And it's been going on for a long time, but people, I don't think, realize that, you know, the Bourne Identity, you know, those Jason Bourne movies, that is a reflection of some people's real lives. I mean, it's a totally fictitious story, but those things do go on. And I tell you, I have felt for a long time with the NSA, listening to everybody's phone calls. If you're important in Washington, they're going to do everything they can
to manage you. Yeah.
So if you're not rock solid in who you are and what right and wrong really is, they got you.
Yeah. But even they don't, you know, today, I think we've moved away from the type of model that Epstein used for sexual blackmail. It's an era of electronic blackmail, and you don't even have to do anything wrong. They can just plant it on your devices and play gotcha that way. So it's really an unprecedented situation.
The symbiosis between intelligence agencies and organized crime is one of the most disturbing revelations from Webb's work. This partnership in crime and covert operations has created a powerful elite class immune to scrutiny or legal consequences, setting the stage for systemic corruption at the highest levels of government. But how deeply is this symbiotic relationship entrenched, and how much of our political system is controlled by these forces? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity.
And a lot of these intelligence agencies, as I note in the book, you know, really for decades have been totally out of control. And, you know, I really start off the book talking about how intelligence agencies and organized crime in the U.S. got in bed together, and really that symbiosis. You know, it was originally justified out of wartime necessity during World War II.
Fighting the Nazis.
Yeah, but it never stopped, right?
Right.
And it's, you know, business is business. And some of these people in our own national security state, you know, realized they could make a lot of money working with organized crime and really shielding them and getting in on the spoils.
But do these people ever feel bad for what they are doing? At the core of the elite's power is a singular truth. They care for nothing but their interests. Whether it's manipulating global markets, suppressing dissent, or orchestrating wars, their actions are always driven by a pursuit of more power, wealth, and control. Empathy, morality, or the well-being of the masses are irrelevant in their calculations.
You know, we think of, in my idealistic years of thinking about America, I thought, well, we did some bad things, yes, and I'm not talking about slavery or anything else. I'm talking about things we did in war. But we had, you know, we really didn't want to do those things. I'm not sure if any of that is true. Are the people involved in this stuff, do they recognize at all that this is evil, or is this just business?
Well, I think when you're talking about intelligence agencies, there's hierarchies. So there's like people maybe low in different levels that may think what they're doing is right and advancing American interests. But then there's people at the top that aren't necessarily like that, and it's about advancing their own interests. If you look at a lot of controversial intelligence operations and decisions, coups, for example, of the past, a lot of it was justified as going against communist influence, trying to keep that from growing. But then some of these same actors, like the Iran-Contra types, they ended up getting involved with the Chinese government just a few years later in the 1990s. And some of this blossomed into what a lot of conservatives today remember as Chinagate during the Clinton administration and things like that. So, you know, they really have no allegiance to anything except their desire to grow their own money and power.
The very systems they create and sustain are designed not to benefit society, but to solidify their dominion over it. While millions struggle for survival, the elites remain insulated, never wavering from their self-serving goals. They will use any means necessary, from disinformation to political manipulation, to ensure their supremacy remains unchallenged. The idea of public welfare, human rights, or justice is simply a tool they use when convenient, nothing more. But who are these people mostly involved in unheard things? The individuals driving these sinister networks of control are often the ones you least expect. The powerful figures hidden in the shadows, operating behind the facades of respectable institutions.
Can we go through some names like Alan Dershowitz and Bill Clinton and Donald Trump? What were they involved in?
So each of those cases is really different. But if I'm looking at, I guess the one that's gotten the most attention, obviously, are the former presidents, right? Trump and Clinton. As far as I'm concerned, the Clinton-Epstein relationship is much more damaging than the Trump-Epstein relationship. But there, are obvious reasons for concern in both of them. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's, in trying to be objective, I can't absolve one or the other.
But are you saying... Are you saying because one is more damaging? Because people don't understand. It's not just the horrific, evil sex trafficking that was going on. It's also massive corruption
and financial crimes. And that's particularly glaring with the Epstein-Clinton relationship. You have someone like Jeffrey Epstein that described himself in the 80s as a financial bounty hunter. He was hiding or finding looted money for powerful people. That's coming from him. And he said this to numerous people. There's numerous sources attesting to this. So obviously he was very comfortable with the offshore financial system, shadow banking, and all of that. Mm-hmm. And then in the late 80s, in addition to becoming involved with Leslie Wexner's finances, he is involved in orchestrating one of the largest Ponzi schemes in U.S. history. The other person he worked with in that, Stephen Hoffenberg, is arrested and goes to jail for that in 1993. Epstein's name is dropped from the case, and he ends up at Clinton White House fundraisers. And one of those fundraisers is involved Hillary Clinton's alleged effort to refurbish the White House. And this makes a brief appearance in Vince Foster's quote-unquote suicide note. The only mention of Hillary Clinton in that suicide note is relating to her and Khaki Hawker-Smith redecorating and how there was nothing wrong with the finances there. If you're... listeners are familiar with the Vince Foster situation and how Hillary Clinton and her office was involved in finding the suicide note when there was nothing in the briefcase and all of that later. It's very interesting. The only mention of her name would be in trying to absolve that particular fundraiser of, any wrongdoing, which would have been Foster's responsibility. And that's Jeffrey Epstein's, one of his first interactions with the White House. There's a picture of him shaking hands with Bill Clinton at that fundraiser donor reception. And only UK media covered that when it came out last December.
These are not just the names that dominate the headlines, but rather a deeply entrenched class of individuals, families, and corporate entities that have shaped history and continue to do so from the shadows. They are wealthy billionaires, high-ranking intelligence officers, corporate moguls, and political figures who wield influence not only in their respective domains, but across global power structures. So, is it true that everything we know is a lie?
It's crazy.
How much of what we think we know is wrong, or how big of a role is what we think we know to what really is happening?
Well, I think there's been a major effort to control the media and how much information gets to the American public about all sorts of things. If you look at the Epstein case, you're only allowed to talk about his sex crimes from 2000 to 2006. Don't look at his financial crimes or any of the thing he did before the year 2000 is, pretty much how mainstream media handles the case. And that's pretty, there's a lot to find if you go back farther.
Mainstream media outlets, often owned by a handful of conglomerates, spin narratives that shape public opinion. These stories are not always about what's true, but about what will maintain the status quo. So, what is the truth? What do these elites want to achieve?
Even if you're BlackRock and you're super greedy, it does not make sense to hollow out the middle class, because eventually, as history teaches us, they come for you. And when they come for you, they come with pitchforks and guillotines, and it's not a good look. So what is it about this moment where the elite are so deranged that they are, from where I'm sitting, playing with fire? Do they just think that we're so stupid that we'll never rebel? Are they counting on this time will be different because they have more control? I don't understand why they would do this.
Yeah, it's hard to know exactly why, but I think it's important to say that at least in my opinion, I think where the powers that be, however you want to define that, are taking people is essentially leading us to some sort of two-tier society where there is really no need for a middle class, and it's really more accurately described as like a neo-feudal style society, where you have a large underclass managed by sort of this more elite group that would do the managing. And I think it really falls under what some people have referred to as technocracy, sort of this idea of more of like a scientific dictatorship. And there's actually this prominent figure from the Club of Rome named Dennis Meadows, and the Club of Rome is an entity that has a very intertwined history with groups that have become infamous over the past several years, like the World Economic Forum, for example. But Dennis Meadows essentially said something to the effect that, you know, for the good of people and the planet and the economy, in his words, that it was going to be necessary to either reduce the world's population so that people could have freedom and use resources the way they want, or that there would have to be a scientific dictatorship imposed on 8 billion or 7 billion people in order to ensure accurate allocation of resources and all of this stuff by a educated, technocratic, scientific elite. And there are some thinkers in Silicon Valley, like Eric Schmidt, for example, who wrote a book on AI with Henry Kissinger, that essentially say that there's going to be this sort of future brought to us by AI, where there will be the class of people that understand how AI works, that program and maintain it. And then there will be this underclass, really, they don't say underclass, but I would say that, of people who AI acts upon, who can't understand what AI is doing to them. And eventually, because of their dependence on AI, will become cognitively diminished and mentally unable, essentially, to make decisions for themselves without AI's help.
Elites are working to ensure that personal freedom is stripped away and that the very idea of self-determination becomes a distant memory. By embedding themselves in key sectors, governments, corporations, financial institutions, and the media, they control not only the flow of information, but also the economic and social structures that keep people in line. The goal isn't just financial dominance, it's total social control.
There are big things on the table that no one's talking about. And
we're all focused on the little stuff they've used to divide and conquer us this whole time. And big things are happening, and basically we are being herded into a techno-feudalism, slavery. I don't know. There's a lot of different names for it going around, but it's not good.
Right.
And it's organized crime, you know, running the show
at the highest levels, and also evil. I mean, it's just getting so dark.
We are often fed a version of the past that supports the status quo, one that elevates the interests of the powerful and diminishes the struggles of the oppressed. Look at how global narratives about wars, political figures, and events are shaped. The mainstream media, often controlled by a handful of corporations with vested interests, selectively presents facts and spins stories to maintain the power structure. They tell us now everything is fine, but that's not the truth.
And, you know, a lot of us are sort of fed this, you know, when we're in school and stuff, sort of this naive, I guess you could call it a fairy tale version of history where there's no corruption, everything's fine. The mob disappeared decades ago, nothing to see here, but that's not the real history of this country.
Beneath the surface, systems of control, manipulation, and deception are thriving, shaping our world in ways we can hardly imagine. The narratives we are fed are carefully crafted to keep us passive and uninformed. The real battle is for our freedom of thought, and the truth is there for those brave enough to seek it. It's time to question everything, because the world they want us to believe in is not the world we should accept. Who do you think will win? The middle class or the elite class? Will they successfully make slaves? Let us know in the comment section. Are we slaves? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.